We're live. If you can hear me, let me know in the comments. Leave a comment and we'll get started in a moment. Hey, Redman, thank you. Cool. Yeah, I'm just typing a poll up, a little survey in the chat. Yeah, I've just been busy making more videos. Thanks. So I've got a new video coming out today, UK time, about 7 p.m. And then I've got about another 9 to 10 videos for the next 9 to 10 days. So we're going to have tons of more videos coming out. And then I will put out more. I will make some more at the start of December. Let me just type this up. Let me see, AI and automation. How's your week been, Redman? Sure. I just added a poll to the chat. Let me, yeah, it should be pinned at the top. Yeah, there we go. There's a poll there if you want to participate in that. Yeah, let me respond to some of the comments. So Redman says it's been good grinding at work, trying to get out the system. Yeah, that's good. Thinking of side projects. Yeah, that's good. Always focus on that. Even though I work as a career coach, I've actually helped one or two of my clients with their social media presence. One of them who worked in the game development industry and has some freelancing clients. I helped him with his YouTube channel, and he's got over 1,000 subscribers now and some views that went viral for a channel that only has 5 to 6 videos. That's good. And he's helping him getting some clients as someone who teaches people how to develop games and do visual effects in games. So that's great for him. The other thing I'd say is if you're thinking about doing a side project, yeah, definitely get started with that. I mean, you can see my career coaching channel itself is a side project, taking some time to grow. But the point is, it's like you just got to put way more into it than you think you would ever have to. You might think, okay, you work at it for 6 months and then things will work out, but it could be 2 years, because I'm almost 2 years into posting, you know, let's say 20 to 30 videos. So it will take some time. So yeah, I hope you work on your side projects and keep us updated in the comments. Because again, like, you know, everyone's, I think it's good for everyone here to be successful in their own way. We're not all competing for the same thing. Someone said, VF says, first time joining the live. Nice being here. That's good. So today, this Friday, and the next 2 Fridays. So we've got 3 Fridays of live streams, including today. And then we'll see how it goes, depending on the Christmas period. Redman says, thanks. Appreciate that. Cool. Yeah. Keep us updated. I know I like all comments, almost all of them. And yeah, I always read all the comments. That's me. It's not like an automated responder to the comments. That's literally me reading them. So keep us updated in the other comments of the videos. You say, my favorite video of yours are ones where you give cold facts that this 9-to-5 corporate career climbing system is no longer possible. Reality check for all of us. I got on Reddit UK jobs and it's really dire. Yeah. So 1 second. What I was going to say was, yeah, I think I try not to keep up too much with what's going on in the UK, even though I'm based in London, UK, because it is just so much negative news and things like that. And you have to be aware of reality too, particularly with higher taxes and things like that. And yeah, I've seen the UK jobs Reddit before briefly, and it is just so negative. It's just like I try not to go there. But I agree, lots of people are struggling, and if they get a job and it's an okay job, it's really not paying well. They're paying a lot of money in tax. It really is. And I mentioned this in one of the videos I've got coming out in the next 3 days. I was editing it in the last few days. So I remember I said something like stage 1 of my career coaching program is helping you become an expert in your industry. And then you can leverage that to being self-employed, to being a consultant, to working abroad. And the whole point is that second step is you become an expert in your field. And that will allow you to maybe have a personal brand online, maybe an Instagram, a Twitter, a YouTube, and you're an expert in that field. And then you can basically leverage that to more freedom for yourself, however that would be defined, right? So those are the type of things I try to, encourage you all to think about, is what does that freedom look like for you, and having that long-term game plan. Because the point there, before I move on, is that because the UK, the way they've structured the system, particularly in the last few years, is they don't want people rising up and succeeding. They don't want you to have social mobility. So you work hard, you grind out to maybe a high 6-figure salary, you're going to be taxed at like 40-50%. And if you say the truth, you deal with censorship, right? It's basically any step you take in this society, they want to screw you over. You get married, there's a high risk of divorce and losing all the money you have. You start a business, there's so much bureaucracy. You've got to, I don't want to go into my business, but there's so many things you need to register, so much pointless admin you have to do around data protection and things like that. And I know you need to follow the law, and the law's there for a reason. But they created all this red tape because it reminds me of people in Canada. When people in Canada post online about the food's expensive, even before 2020, the cost of living's high, the houses are unaffordable. It's like they've created a socialist state. That's what you see. The UK is very much like Eastern Europe. The stereotype of a post-Soviet country that's not progressing, that's high taxes, very low social mobility, and it's becoming more and more depressed. People think, oh, I can never make it. That kind of negative stereotype people have of Eastern Europe, that's actually what's occurring in the UK and Canada and other countries. But like I say, UK is more closer to Eastern European post-Soviet countries in terms of the culture now, rather than this aspirational American dream type of culture that you could say UK was maybe closer to American culture in a way, to a certain extent, like a decade or two ago. Now, yes, we went through that. Jurassic Thunder says, what do you know about Turkey economy, especially regarding feminism? I worked with, when I was working at a major American investment bank, a woman who was from Turkey, she moved to work in London. I think she might have worked in other roles before. She worked in one of the big 4 consulting firms like Deloitte or Ernst & Young, one of them, before she went into investment banking, working in advisory type of risk management on the trading floor with me. And she was from Turkey. She went through a divorce. She was kind of the girl boss archetype that I talk about. And I asked her a few questions about Turkey, actually. And she told me, she went through a divorce there. And I think there's certain aspects of the culture maybe she didn't like. I don't know what she was implying because she didn't go into the details. I don't know if she's saying, because I know there's some religious tensions between there, maybe between Christians and Muslims. I don't know all the details. And I got the impression she wanted to leave. And also the economy wasn't doing well. And there were some sanctions, or some American sanctions there, which is impacting the industry there. I know a few other Turkish people who work in London from the UK, and they kind of like it here, but they visit back for their culture. I don't know too much about the feminism in Turkey, but one thing I noticed from traveling, and I've traveled to many countries in Latin America. I've worked in America for 6 months and traveled to a few other countries in Asia and places like that. One thing you realize is that the agenda is the same very much globally, right? So it might be at slower paces, but it's very similar. You go into a major city, for example, in a Latin American country, you'll see the extreme push for feminism and things like that. And you think, oh, it wouldn't be there, but it kind of is, right? You might be able to avoid it. It's not as obvious as in the UK or somewhere like that, but it's still there. So I'm sure you're in Turkey, I assume, or you're from Turkey, or you have friends there. It probably is relatively similar, just done slightly differently. I had someone I worked with from a business perspective outside of the finance industry, and he was based in Morocco. And Morocco, we might think, would be a more conservative country, but he mentioned some of the impacts of feminism there and the high divorce rate and things like that, or people who'd lost a lot of money in divorces. So yeah, it's like the woman not wanting to play their gender role, things like that. That's why I don't try to tell people what to do in their lives, because I know some people get triggered when I have certain strong views, even guys in the comments that broadly agree with me. I think you should think really carefully about whether you want to get married and have kids. I'm not saying having kids is a bad thing or being in a healthy relationship, but how would you do it in a way that's kind of outside the system? Whether you're in a long-term relationship and you're not signing legal agreements to get married in the sense with the government. You don't need to sign an agreement with the state that you're getting married to a woman. You can have kids and homeschool them and things like that. Just try to do as much as you can to be outside the system. And I know it's easier said than done, but I think that's the only way to really live a dignified life now. Otherwise, you will be impacted by feminism. You will be. I don't have it right now, but I have a nice little PowerPoint slide. You've probably seen. I'm going to show it more in my videos. I've stopped using a bit of it, where you've got this dynamic that occurs when you have feminism, liberalism, all the woke agenda, whatever you want to call it, where it creates a social dynamic where you have these entitled women and insecure men. And you see it in the corporate world, you see it in and around any major city, because the whole dynamic's kind of biased in favor of them. Like sometimes I notice even little things like in a grocery store, things like that, it's always the woman's in charge and the guy is like following her around and listening to her instructions of how to live their lives and what to buy, what to believe, what to do on the weekend, things like that. So yeah, it's very dysfunctional everywhere. That's why I keep telling you guys, just focus on your success, focus on your freedom, and try to make it work for you. So keep leaving comments. I will respond to all the comments, definitely. I'm going to go through some interesting things about AI first, and then we're going to talk about men and how difficult it is to kind of stay in their job. Yeah, keep leaving comments. I will come back to them, definitely. Now, let's go through this little thing about AI. So this is an article from Visual Capitalist where they produce certain like interesting infographics, and it's talking about where AI get their facts, right? So he's talking about how AI is getting its facts mainly from Reddit, then Wikipedia, YouTube, Google, and things like this. And I wanted to just point out this because this is a funny thing they often say on Twitter, because I know there's two main AI chatbots that people use on a daily basis. I know there's other ones out there. Sometimes people use Cloud, however you pronounce it, for writing. Some people use Perplexity or Gemini, things like that. But the joke often said on Twitter, because many people may be more right-wing leaning there, and they prefer Grok, with GROK, which is the AI from Elon Musk, where you can ask it questions a bit like ChatGPT. And people prefer that because they make jokes how ChatGPT and some other major normal AI models that people use, they're getting 40% of their facts or opinions from Reddit. That's why I notice when I speak with ChatGPT and type up messages, it does have that sort of spin. I wouldn't necessarily say left-wing leaning, but kind of following the mainstream expert narrative. That's why if you're interacting with GPT and you're doing it on a daily basis, because I know some of you probably using GPT actively, maybe for your business ideas, maybe just to bounce your kind of life plans with along with them. And the thing with them is try to encourage your AI chatbot to be like politically incorrect. Tell them more about your personal views or your personal perspective that are maybe contrarian, and encourage it to kind of respond in that way. And I notice once you train your ChatGPT to do that, that's great. So I can see you've responded. I will come back to the comments 100%. I just want to go through a few details here. So here we go. Yeah, I just want to focus on this little thing here. It says here that there are three major risks of relying on user-generated content. And what you're saying is a lot of AI is increasingly based on, it's not based actually, but it's based on user-generated content like Reddit and things like that. And what that means is it can come up with certain issues because it's basically using other people's opinions. It's not using necessarily objective facts. And then you have these three issues here. You have misinformation and rumor propagation, which means that it's coming up with just personal ideas and things like that. It's basically coming up with what is the consensus opinion on Reddit. 40% of its info is coming from Reddit, or let's just say any forum. It's not thinking independently. I would hope that, you know, ChatGPT, when you ask it something, let's just say about health, that it would go to the official health surveys that have been done, or, you know, the health experiments they do, you know, when they test people like, oh, if they maybe do more cardio, how does it impact their heart health? if they spend more time in the sunlight, how does it impact maybe depression and things like that. You think it'd go to the source of that, like there are available libraries online to check that type of information, but often it doesn't. It will just go and source something from Reddit. I remember many times ChatGPT, when it lists the sources, it will say Reddit, which is a bit of a risk. Then it has echo chamber amplification. Popular yet unverified narratives may get repeated again in there if they gain traction. Masking less visible but more accurate sources. So I've noticed that even on the other side, even with Grok, which is maybe more right-wing leaning, it can be kind of biased in that direction. And I don't really have any issue with it that much, but I just realized, okay, if I have to push in a particular direction, Grok will probably lean right-wing and ChatGPT will lean left-wing. It's just the reality of it. And then lack of authority says, especially for consequential health topics, for health, law, finance, user-generated sites lack the editorial oversight required for reliable guidance. But this is the risk. You don't want to have at the same time an appeal to authority. And what I mean by that is, okay, we're not going to listen to left-wing or right-wing. We're just going to listen to the official establishment narrative. And we know how wrong the establishment narrative is, particularly in recent years, particularly when it comes to health. So to what extent can we actually listen to them on that? It's all about independent thinking, and the use you get out of AI is dependent on your own critical thinking and free thinking skills. You got to be a free thinker, independent thinker, things like that. And I realized that because I know people who just have got dumber since AI came out. They ask AI the dumbest questions. They stop thinking. They just export all their thoughts or all their thinking process to AI. Now, I think we all do that to a certain extent when we want a quick answer and we don't want to think something through. But I mean, I try to really test AI like it's a friend that I'm not friends with, but like an expert source, but that I'm never fully 100% blindly believing. I'm thinking about this. What's your opinion? Then I think about my opinion and I push it around a bit. Right. So it's like an assistant. That's the whole point of these AI chatbots, to use it like an assistant, not just blindly believe in it. So that's something I wanted to point out, because a lot of people are talking about, oh, AI is taking all the jobs. I think AI, and I'm going to switch to this tab. As you can see from this tab, some of the main sources it's using. Let's just focus on the top few there. AI can't be blamed for taking all the jobs, right? I think, like I say, it's relying on Reddit. It's relying on kind of user-generated content. It's only as smart as you are. It's only as smart as the sources that it's using, right? So over time, I think it'll become more effective. But as a major factor for a lot of the layoffs we're seeing recently, I think that's not the case. There's a lot of changes. There's slower economy, less consumer demand. Many companies scared to invest and grow because of tariffs, because of an unstable economy, recessionary type of signals, things like that. There's loads of things that are creating this dynamic where AI isn't necessarily the number one factor, even though you're often told it is. So let's go through some of the comments. Turkey's transitioning into a second world country, but there's pushback from religious people, Muslims and seculars. Feminism is growing here. Funny how women are the same everywhere. Yeah, I'll give you a funny story here. I don't want to name the country because I don't want to. I went to let's just say I went to another country in Latin America because I've been there quite often. And it was definitely a third world country that is going through some improvements, but definitely at the lower end of the development scale in Latin America. And there was a woman working in the coffee shop who looked perfectly normal, who's dressed like normal, like quite covered, wearing lots of clothes, wasn't wearing like very little clothes. But I got into a conversation with her and she came across like a really normal, kind of maybe lower class girl, kind of regular girl. But she was talking about how she saw some New York Fashion Week and the way the women were dressed there, and she wanted to wear more clothes like that. But, it's too conservative in El Salvador. Women can't get away with dressing in different clothes like that, things like that. The whole point I'm trying to make is, yeah, you go to a conservative country and a woman will want more liberal, feminist type of habits, even if she grew up in a more conservative environment and a whole country's like that. The only thing keeping her so-called conservative or traditional, or being a trad wife or a more traditional woman, is the patriarchy, or the cultural rules that enforce that. Otherwise, she'll completely end up like your super leftist, girl boss, feminist, whatever you want to call it, right? So it really is up to the men and the system and the government to implement those restrictions. But, I know that's a controversial topic. People don't want to get into that, but you know, the same way you have restrictions on a child, you have restrictions on women, you have restrictions on men to a certain extent to have a healthy society. But if you're not going to do that, and you're going to say women have no rules on them and men have more rules on them, you're going to have a dysfunctional society. Like you say, Reddit here. I always tell ChatGPT not to use left-wing media. Yeah, that's a good idea there. But I also think, and this is becoming more and more obvious to me, that the right-wing media that people like to say is more independent, a lot of that has been captured. And you're seeing, I don't want to get into politics too much here, but you're seeing a breakup of the MAGA movement, you know, different people having different views on so many different things. And I think a lot of these so-called more independent media on the right wing, they're co-opted by the system. They're working for three-letter agencies. They're pushing certain agendas. So I'm very skeptical of both of them. I try to think independently, particularly in the last few months, when I think it should be obvious to a lot of us that even a lot of the right-wing media is captured by the establishment. Jurassic says that won't work. I'm a software engineer. Certainly nothing from the BBC or the Guardian. Why on earth would Reddit be used as a source? Is full of woke idiots. Yeah, I don't think Reddit is a good source. But then the thing is, I don't think we live in a world where there is like objective reality that we can all agree with. You have to think for yourself, because like I say, I see there being three opinions. There's the left-wing opinion, the right-wing opinion, and then there's the establishment opinion, which might be a bit of both, and it might control a bit of both. Like, I think a lot of these social media influencers, even they appear to be independent right-wing media, I think they're controlled by the establishment. They're pushing certain narratives, and I don't want to get into it now, but I think about someone like Tim Pool, who people might say is kind of center or center-right, but he's been pushing the civil war narrative so aggressively. It's just become a bit weird. Like, I think, has he been told to push that? Certain other people have been told to push certain narratives for against different foreign policy and things like that. I'm like, were you told to say that, or do you actually think about that? Because you keep repeating the same thing. Even a lot of these podcasters, like the Diary of CEO guy, the Chris Williamson guy, Joe Rogan. I mean, you look at what they're pushing and you're like, I think they've been told to push certain talking points, you know? Someone said, Welsh Hibby says, Wikipedia, another left-wing biased website that lied about its people. Yeah, lied about people, yeah. So what they've started, and I'll put this in the chat, I haven't checked this, but I know loads of people say Grokkipedia is going to replace Wikipedia because it's like a more right-wing leaning version of Wikipedia from Elon Musk. And I've seen a couple of people check those and check autobiographies of more controversial people, and it does have a much more independent view of their biography. It's capitalism. You have to think for yourself more than ever. Yeah, that's very true. Grokkipedia, you can go and check that out if you're interested in seeing an alternative to Wikipedia. So now we're going to move on. Now we're going to talk about this little clip we have here. And what it is about men struggling to find work, right? It came out in the last few months. The job market slowing. Men, particularly compared to women, are having a hard time finding work. So let's go through a few little points here in this video. Let's go.
Analysis of labor data by NBC News shows that the unemployment rate for men between 23 and 30 with a bachelor's degree has jumped nearly double that of women and is higher than the overall unemployment rate. Well, now young men with degrees are more likely to be unemployed than those with just a high school diploma. NBC News senior policy reporter Shannon Pettypiece joins us now. Shannon, when I saw this data come out, I was really interested, surprised, but I'm really curious what story it tells us. What do you think this tells us about why we're experiencing it now, but also why men are feeling this?
Well, when I talked to economists about this data, which really jumped out at me as well, they pointed to changing dynamics in the job market at the moment. There has been a real surge in demand for traditionally women-dominated fields and professions. So healthcare, where 80% of the workers are women, is one of the main drivers of hiring. Meanwhile, some of these traditionally male-dominated industries like tech, for example, has actually been cutting thousands of jobs over the past couple years here after going on a big hiring spree during the pandemic. We're also seeing job losses in industries like manufacturing. So at this moment, the labor market, which really isn't growing that much at all, whatever growth is happening is really occurring in these female-dominated industries, which leaves a lot of men, especially those with college degrees, struggling to get their foot in the job market.
There's a couple key points before we move on to the next clip, right? So let me just go through your comments. Can you see which companies have this list of sources? I think Anthropic uses Stack Overflow more than the others in the list. Let me see. It doesn't actually list it. All it says is ChatGPT, and it says top domains cited by LLMs like ChatGPT and Perplexity. That's what it says. Yeah, doesn't mention much detail. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're going to focus on this. One more comment. What's your thoughts on The Onion and the space for satirical media in this current age? Interested to hear your thoughts. I think The Onion used to be funny like 10 to 15 years ago. Then it became some kind of left-wing thing. They're trying to harass Alex Jones, the GOAT, and try to buy InfoWars. I don't really agree with their type of push to undermine him and demonize him. Also, they have Babylon Bee, but I heard Babylon Bee, which is more like a right-wing version of The Onion. They're criticized because they're kind of Zionists, but I haven't been keeping up with it. Yeah, I just think you got to be careful, think for yourself. That's what I tried to do. I tried to think like, what position are people in and why are they there? Why is certain, I don't know what we can get into discussing here, but someone like Fuentes, if you're familiar with Fuentes, I won't say his first name. I don't know if you can discuss him in great detail on this platform, but when someone's pushed into certain positions of prominence that they can have an opinion that they weren't allowed to have before, you have to ask why. You have to ask why certain narratives are being pushed. Why is Tim Pool constantly talking about the Civil War and almost pushing for that to occur, even though to a certain extent that doesn't seem highly likely, unless the system pushes people to be out in the street? Why is there such a push to divide men and women? And you could say the obvious thing would be to lower the birth rate because the system seems hell-bent on that. Why is there a push to remove men, or you could say white men to a certain extent, from the workplace? What is really going on here? Or even someone like Alex Jones, who's considered a bit more controversial. Why was he allowed to be on Tucker Carlson multiple times or some more mainstream platforms? Is it because they want to push what opinions he has and make them more mainstream now? Why were they demonizing him so much before? So you got to think about what's going on. And I see like the system is using both sides to push the left wing and the right wing, to push them up against each other, to create more friction rather than a cohesive society. And the system can flip things from being super divisive to super inclusive and having a productive, healthy society, but they don't want that. The same way they can organize having, more healthy food in the grocery store. But when you walk through the grocery store, at least 5 aisles are full of crap. So it's like, they want you to be sick. They want you to be uninformed. They want you to be broke. They could decide tomorrow that they're going to have a 10-year plan to back the currency with hard assets like gold. And I know people might like Bitcoin and things like that, but let's just keep it simple. Let's just say the paper money is going to be backed by gold. They won't do that, right? So everything's there for a reason. And if something's pushed to prominence, you should think why. Why is someone like Myron Gaines all of a sudden allowed to have all these controversial opinions publicly, and you're not allowed to say certain things, or before you weren't allowed to have that opinion? You got to think about these things. So that's what I think. Now, let's get back into this, right? So we got this issue where the unemployment rate for 23 to 30-year-olds is jumping, and it's nearly double for men compared to women based on these statistics. If we go back a bit here, the unemployment rate among younger Americans, I'll come back to the comments definitely, but let's just go through this little clip, right? So it's saying when it looks at unemployment among younger Americans, men is significantly higher than women, for bachelor degree young adults. So it's about 6% unemployment rate for men, and it's about close to 3% for women. So that's a massive gap, right? This is the second. Can you see the second bar here? I hope you can see it. My mouse is moving. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's the second blue line. You can see how much higher it is for men versus women. So men are twice as likely as women to, be unemployed after they both complete a bachelor's degree, right? And then whereas for other cases it's slightly different or more similar, but that is the big gap there, right? So that it's kind of showing that a degree won't necessarily save you, and how it puts you in a position where you're doing all the right things, but the system's creating such a heavy bias in favor of women that is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy when you look at it. And yeah, just look at that second one. I know the other ones might be more similar, but I'm thinking you've got 6% unemployment rate for men with bachelor degrees and 3% unemployment rate for women. Like, that's an obvious bias in hiring. Probably at the junior levels, they're hiring more women compared to more men. And it reminds me of what I've seen in the industry, like the finance industry, whereby you would have a lot of older men in middle management, senior management, and for them to meet their bonus targets, to their performance targets, they have to hire more women, more minorities for equality reasons. And typically they'd hire a lot of white women. That was the trend I kept seeing again and again through all different companies that I'd worked at, right? And then that's what ends up happening. So the younger generation of men, it makes sense why they might be so-called more frustrated or disillusioned with things, and then they're getting gaslit by the same older generation of men. Oh, these younger guys, they're too misogynistic, they hate women, blah blah blah. But it's like my whole life I've been dealing with that bias, and I'm sure many of you have seen it too. So yeah, let's keep going. So I think also when we looked through this little clip, we saw these two women. Let me put them on the screen if we can. There we go. We've seen these two women talking about men's issues, right? And you think if they're going to ask about, let me get a good pause. There's not a great pause there, but there's both two women talking about men's issues and men's unemployment, but they are obviously two women. It'd be good to have a man actually discussing this, but this is just typical thing. You've got, like, questionably DEI hires, questionably, oh, we need a girl boss to review these men and keep them in line. And that's the standard thing you can see in this society. Often you'll have men in maybe senior roles, but they'll use women at the mid-level of the establishment, in the media, in the academia, to hold down the younger men, right, from succeeding. And you see it time and time again. It's like the typical mainstream media approach. The men are typically ignored and pushed aside for the girl bosses to kind of discuss and dictate and really manufacture a completely fake narrative about things, right, or a completely skewed narrative. Now let's go through another graph they went through. Top majors by gender, right? Business and marketing, engineering, computer science, health, business and marketing, and psychology. But what it's showing here is that for men, what she was trying to explain, which I think can be a genuine point, most men will typically be in business and marketing or engineering or computer sciences. So that's where men typically are, and those are areas where they are doing less hiring, whereas more women are in healthcare, to a certain extent, business and marketing, and psychology. And the whole narrative there is for more the technical degrees, there's less and less hiring right now, like the tech industry shrinking. But for some other areas like healthcare, that's growing. That's where women typically are, because there's more of an aging population, more people with health issues, psychology, higher demand for mental health therapy in this broken society. So more women are doing well because they head into the sectors that are growing or being stable, at least in terms of hiring. So I think that's like a fair point to be fair to the analysis these women have done, where there's more layoffs in the sectors or the industries where men are based. So if we go to the next clip, let's check out the next clip. Before I do that, I'll go back to your comments. 12 to 10, there we go. Just before we do this, let's go back to your comments. Cohabitation is a risk. A woman calls law enforcement under duress and says you have a weapon. It's kaput. Okay. Cohabitation is a risk. Yeah, I agree with you. And I've seen women threaten in a joking way and in a not so joking way that, oh, if a man that she's in a relationship with doesn't do what she says, she's going to go to the courts or go to the police and make up an accusation and things like that. I've seen that enough to be like, you know, it's up to you if you want to be in a relationship. I prefer to be single, at least for now. But yeah, you got so many risks of false allegations from women, living with a woman, her taking ownership of your property, even if you didn't buy it together, and she somehow has a right because she's been living with you for a few years. And you'd be surprised, some of those laws exist often in other developing countries outside of the West. I've seen that too. So Jurassic Thunder says, imagine a country where men are unemployed and women are employed by the BS jobs. They want 50-50 at the top, but not when it comes to garbage collecting. This is the matriarchy feminism fought for. Yeah. And I posted on my YouTube like community tab or posts tab where I put like the high percentage of men working in certain sectors like construction, like 90% of construction workers are men, tradesmen, electricians, plumbers, dealing with sanitation, a lot of the heavy labor type of jobs, policemen, things like that. Obviously, these are military, navy, all these type of fields, oil rigs, things like that. Typically, they're men doing some of those difficult jobs, and women want the easy, air-conditioned email jobs, you know, working in an air-conditioned office, just sending emails back and forth and making tons of money. That's where they're fighting for equality so they can get a high-paying managerial job, delegate the work to younger men and not do much of it, and suck up to the older men in power. Get the likes up. Yeah, if you click like, everyone clicks like. This will help the channel, definitely help the live appear on more people's YouTube feed. They don't care about men. Yeah, that's true. Jurassic Thunder says, young adult females are being hired because of simp CEOs and hiring managers. Let's be honest. They think they can have a chance at the dating market with this. Yeah, I definitely think there is some of that, like maybe older male managers sleeping with younger women that they hire. I've heard of this occurring quite often at the big four accounting firms like KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, and things like that. I don't know, not those companies specifically, but just the general accounting firms at that level where women will progress their career much faster because they're sleeping with the management. Well, Shibby says, the same woman who would complain there's no economically attractive men in the dating world will stop taking the jobs. Yeah, I think there's that hypocrisy there. And that's why, again, because I run a career coaching channel and not a dating coaching channel or a lifestyle coaching channel, I try not to get into it too much. But yeah, I think you're just better off as a man being independent, maximizing your freedom. And to quote some red pill ideas, is where you basically build your life on your terms. You're your own mental point of origin. You can think for yourself, which we covered before. And then a woman slots into your life and out of your life. You have some space or time in your life that you might be filling up with hobbies or your side hustle. And then maybe you meet a girl and it's a healthy relationship. She slots into your life. But if she's removed from your life through a breakup, through a disagreement, let's just say a year or two later, or maybe 5 to 10 years later, you're not unfulfilled in your life. You're maintaining your other hobbies, whatever they would be, your fitness, your health, your friendships, your side business. She's not that high a priority. She's replaceable, right? That's the best approach to deal with in this society. I know we'd prefer it to be maybe ideal dynamics between men and women, but it's just not. So if women are going to see it as a transactional relationship with you, based on how much money you're making or what your social status is, you should see the same with her. What is she serving for you? Is she serving whatever needs you want in a relationship? If not, then she's disposable the same way you're disposable. Let's go to the next clip here.
Right now. For the young men, the experts that I talked to, suggested potentially looking at a career pivot. Of course, healthcare, certainly, I've probably mentioned that about 10 times in this conversation. It is the hot place in the job market. So for men, they consider careers in there. And also for men who are looking to kind of stay in one of these more male-dominated industries, construction is still an area that has a big need, even though we've seen some slowdown in construction hiring and construction demand in the current economy. I talked to some construction economists, and they said there's still a lot of need and demand for men there, which is kind of helping for those without a college degree with just a high school diploma. But it does take some training and experience to get their foot in the door even there. Just
really good storytelling about the context of those numbers there. Shannon Petty. Shannon, thank you so much.
So let me go through some of the analysis you said there, talking about a career pivot. And I think that's worthwhile considering. I'm not saying all the men who work in office jobs or work in tech have to become male nurses and work in the healthcare industry like women, but consider what growing areas there are. Now, I remember an example I've covered on my channel, someone called Gregory Manarino, who's a successful trader who worked at Bear Stearns, and he has his own YouTube channel now, and he's a day trader from home because he has a lot of money from his time working in the industry, and he gives some financial tips online. Before that, he was actually working in the medical field. So he switched from a high-paying medical degree, a medical field of work, to stockbroking, to becoming self-employed. So this is what I mean about thinking about life, not necessarily in terms of, oh, I'm going to stay in my field for the rest of my life, but pivoting either every three to 5 years within your own industry, between companies, between roles, or every 10 years between industries. And I know this, like I say, easier said than done, and it's not something everyone could do, but really think it's outside the box. And healthcare is definitely going to be a growing area, right? Tech and healthcare, right? In terms of implementing tech in healthcare, more of an aging population, there's going to be a need to service them, whether it's from nurses or technology or things like that, high-skilled doctors. So I think being self-employed and doing that would be good, engaged in telemedicine, which would be, working online as a doctor and doing analysis through there, and having maybe some local staff doing some direct testing on older people while you can work online as the expert doctor and analyzing the results and reports. That's where things are trending for like high-paying tech job. I mean, healthcare jobs. So it's worthwhile considering that, right? And the other thing is construction, right? I think it depends on where you're based, but I noticed in a lot of developing countries, they're building a lot of the apartments. And if you become like a project manager for construction, that's something worthwhile considering too. It's all about thinking what are the growing areas and what are the declining areas. Hello to the new joiner here, WQBH. Let's continue. We've got a few comments here. Phoebe Davis says, if you think the birth rate is low now, ... What she's basically saying, is the top comment here, is basically saying, birth rate is going to get even lower when less and less men can be providers, right? So here it says, we're replying to that, we're right on track to get the highly coveted under 1 mark. Bring it on, baby. We're transitioning to a new economy that's not going to need much people. Great, I can't wait. Hopefully there's less traffic. Oh my God, look, I work in a hospital. It seems at least 2 nurses on my unit are pregnant at any given time, right? So different views there. The point I want to make there is that, if less men can afford families, then less people are. Okay, I'll come back to the comments in a second. If less people are dating, then less people can have healthy careers over a longer time span. They're less likely to have families. So they're going to eventually be in a situation whereby they're going to have to constantly be in survival mode. And people are constantly in survival mode. Even if they get that good job, they end up oh, how long is this going to last? Is it going to last 2 or 3 years? Can I really buy that big house with a massive mortgage? What happens if I lose my job? So people are constantly like living on edge, right? Constantly looking for distractions, trying to get it through the week, get through the month, get through the year, get through a couple years. And if they don't have that stability, you're just going to have people not having kids. The next comment says, this is true. I'm a therapist, and currently several young men and some women graduated college 2 years ago. They can't find work at all. They're really depressed, they're anxious, and they're isolated. It's much worse than reported. And then someone else is replying saying, oh, they all got degrees. Someone and their friend got degrees. They're just working in retail and fast food, or they're unemployed. People saying, I've just given up on trying to get a job, just reading books and working out now. Yeah, there's this whole concept, and I just want to focus on that briefly. I'll highlight this comment from the screen. And then what he's saying is, there's this whole concept of being a NEET, not in education, employment, or trading, NEET. It's quite big on Twitter, and I'm sure other websites and forums like 4chan, things like that, where people are like, a lot of guys are like, okay, well, I'm not going to move forward and be in a healthy relationship, have kids, or progress in my career. I'll just live on government benefits or do the bare minimum kind of work in a retail sector or service sector. Maybe they're living with their parents, living in their mum's basement, or living in a low-cost life themselves, whether it's van life, small apartment, living in a small studio apartment. And then what they do is they just focus on everything else apart from necessarily making a ton of money. So they might be reading books, working out. They might take some of the money they make on a easier part-time job and invest that in crypto or something more risky and see if that works out. But they super focus on their health and their life fulfillment, everything outside of social status and money. And for some of them, they seem to be quite happy and doing well, or made decent amounts of money investing in some crypto before certain coins become popular and things like that. So it can work out for some people, but it's up to you. And then last comment I wanted to go through is, let me see if I can find it. TJR. I made a note. TJR. Let me see if I can find it. No. Okay, I can't find the other comment. Let me go through your comments. I think you should not be in your own way. If the audience is willing to listen to you talk about the dating market or manifest stuff, you should adapt to it and chase that bag. I think that's a fair point. Yeah, I tried to get into it a bit. Yeah, so if it's interesting, I don't mind going into it. It's just, I think it's partly that I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. Partly, I think that it's kind of been discussed to death. I think the red pill has kind of matured. Like either everyone's aware of it or people who aren't aware of it don't really care. I think what maybe I'm talking about in some of these terms is about lifestyle design, which is an extension of career coaching, because I talk about time freedom, financial freedom, and relationships somewhat relating to that. Yeah, it's up to you what you do. It depends where you are in your life. Some guys in their 20s, they're super desperate to find a girl to be in a relationship with and things like that. But yeah, it really depends on what works for you. Because yeah, some people have really strong opinions. They get triggered if I think, oh, you should be single and not be in a relationship. People are like, oh, you shouldn't advise people to do that. You should really, encourage people to get married and have kids. But you see how dysfunctional it is for so many people. It was so funny to me when Steven Crowder, who's like a right-wing American commentator on traditional gender values and all these things, and then a video leaked of his wife who's divorcing him, having a big argument with him, and he's shouting at her. And I don't know who leaked the video. Maybe his wife did. I don't know. It's all speculation. But it's kind of ridiculous. I think most people, so many people, the majority of people are either single or in an unhappy relationship. Some people are unhappy, but a lot of it's dysfunctional. I'm Native American, a Mexican and American, and the white women think I don't know how to do my work without them. Yeah, there is a lot of white women who maybe they don't have kids, or because of their social status, they can think they can talk down to men of color or men of different minority groups. They think they know it all. And also because they don't have kids, they have this kind of matriarchal instinct, this motherly instinct that they misplace on their younger male co-workers. They see them as like sons or things like that. Like the same way the stereotype of a woman who doesn't have kids, she gets lots of cats and she treats the cats like they're her kids. You see the same behavior that they do with some male employees who are more junior than them. So yeah, I would just be confident, take control of your workload, and don't let people, especially women, walk over you in the workplace. This is what I mean. And this is why I cover the topics like someone just said about red pill and manosphere stuff, because all the social dysfunction you're seeing in society is playing out in the workplace. It's not like, oh, there's social dysfunction in the dating world or your dating life or family members and friends and people being quite cutthroat and backstabbing and gossipy. You have to deal with that at workplace too. It's not just, okay, white woman being dysfunctional liberals and feminists in the nightclub or in the social setting, but you have to deal with it at work. And that's why all of those things become relevant here, even if it is difficult. Fuentes and Shapiro both got that weird Spaniard Sephardic name and appearance, just saying. Yeah, I think Fuentes' grandfather or father has Mexican ancestry, yeah. But even though he likes to claim maybe his Italian heritage more, but yeah, it's a messy situation. It's a whole messy situation. I always think about the people who really run the system, who all of a sudden give Fuentes a bit of a more mainstream coverage. And Piers Morgan keeps talking about Fuentes, which is and Piers Morgan is the bland mainstream version of whatever they want to push. That's the way I see it. Piers Morgan, you can say other people too, but and PBD interviewed Fuentes, things like that. The whole idea here is that they want to mainstream those talking points. But I think if the establishment, the elite, the people who really run things want to mainstream certain opinions, they can do it. The same way, I won't repeat what I said earlier. If they want to have a more healthy dynamic, they could, but they're pushing this weird divisive agenda, right? Yes, red pill is dead, but have heard of CGA. Yeah, I talk about CGA on my channel. I make a few videos reacting to his content. I've reviewed his book. It has like 18,000 views. One of my book reviews of his main book, Free Agent Lifestyle. Have you heard of CGA? Yeah, Coach Greg Adams. He talks about making money is more important, and economy is basically where our dating, social decay problems come from. Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot. That's why, yeah, like I was saying, there's so much link between the dysfunction in people in the society and the economy that's completely linked back and forth. But yeah, for me personally, it's like get your money in the best position it can get through my career coaching, through your plans, and then you basically try to live your life in the most free way possible, right? I think there's a book about this called Being Free in an Unfree World, which I always hear people reference online, but I haven't read. So you're just trying to do your best in these circumstances rather than try and live the baby boomer lifestyle of the previous generation. So we've gone through a bit of situation about men dropping out. Feel free to keep leaving your comments. And just to let you know, 1 second. I do have my career coaching program that is available. And because it is Black Friday time period, there's a 20% discount, link in description. Should be a link in description, typically for my videos, for my career coaching. So if you want to get started with that before next year when the economy is going to get worse and the social dynamics, so worthwhile looking into that. Now we're going to move on to the next clip, which is here. So if you don't know Anton Daniels, he makes some content covering some financial news and he runs quite a popular channel. We're going to listen to him here. Actually, I think I covered this. Let me see what he has to say, actually. Let's listen to his opinion on this topic.
Diversify your income. What does that mean? That means that you never become dependent on one source of income. You always either A, got a hustle, or B, got a second job, or C, you have something that you are working on big, or A, B, and C. You want to have a hustle, you want to have a regular job, and something that you're working on long term. You never, ever, ever put all of your eggs in one basket, unless you like some major professional like a surgeon or, you know, something like that, a physician or something. But other than that, if y'all are working a regular job, and I do think that jobs are going to ramp up as we start to develop different things like Apple investing in the United States of America, chip manufacturing, all of that, right? I do believe that jobs are going to come back as far as how many jobs that are in the private sector and not necessarily in the public sector. But I do think that you need to be very careful. Number one, I know somebody that always hit me up and they say, Anton, you know, my friends always tell me to get into these industries or get into these industries. And what do you think about that? And I said, well, do you like what you do? Yep. Is it a safe place for you to continue to do business? And do you see yourself being upended in it or whatever? Nope. Stay where you at right now. Stay where you at. So, and again, I'm not telling y'all not to level up within a company or whatever like that. But what I am telling you is that now is not the time to be playing hooky. Now is not the time to be getting on social media, telling what your thoughts if you got a regular job that you depend on, and it's a possibility for you to go viral. Now is not the time for you to be talking stuff and talking tough and going out here and spending a whole bunch of money. Now, I know that people going to do what they do and they're going to spend a lot of money anyway. That's just the nature of things. But you don't have to be amongst that group of people that's making that mistake. Chill out. Chill out. It's a lot of evictions. It's a lot of foreclosures. It's a lot of stuff that's going to the people. And people are going to have to, it's going to be more competitive. I think that one of the things that makes it more competitive is also because there were a lot of layoffs when it came to government jobs. So whereas it wouldn't be as competitive for you to be in the private sector, now you got a lot of people mass applying. Yo, and I will tell you that automation and AI messed up everything.
So we're going to play another clip from him in a moment, but I just want to go through that first. So let me go through the comments. Someone says red pill is dead. Yeah, that's a fair point. So let's go through what this guy is saying. So he's saying diversify your income, similar things that I say in my channel. The other thing he's talking about the public sector. I've got a video coming up in the next week or so about how in America, there's about 150,000 government workers who are losing their jobs. And in the UK, it's about 50,000. So lots of people in the government who typically think they have safe government jobs. You're not going to get hired and fired like in the private sector, but that's happening there too. So you've got a bloated job market. So many people are flooded into the breadline on the unemployment line, and they're desperately seeking for a job. So in a sense, it doesn't make sense why people are job hugging or quiet cracking, which means they're staying stuck in the same job they're in because they're fearful of getting fired or fearful of moving to another job only to get fired. I know someone, without getting into their personal life, someone who works in an architect industry, and they recently moved house and bought a new house, and they moved from one job to another in their industry. And then when they moved from the stable job they had to a higher paying job, within 3 months, that company shut down because it went out of business. So he lost his job while he bought a new house. He thought he was going to get a pay rise and a comfier life. And this is why I'm telling you guys to be careful and make smart career decisions. I know it's easier said than done, but that's definitely what you need to do. So we've got a lot of public sector job cuts. A lot of the job market's kind of been flooded. And then it says the trends, right? Don't get caught up in trends. So what he's talking about here is, oh, there's a hype every now and again. Oh, everyone should go into the trades and become a plumber, become an electrician and have a high 6-figure salary. Or you should learn to code, and then people learn to code. People go through those boot camps that cost like 5-10 grand or more. And then all of a sudden the tech market slows down and there's no jobs there. So you got to be careful about these hypes. I always wonder, like, again, who's pushing the narrative about a hype to enter a particular industry? Why was it just before the job market crashed for the tech industry, was there so much hype about learn to code, everyone should go do a tech boot camp or go and get a job in tech and you get paid high salaries? It's probably because there's a bubble, like there was a short-term bubble in the tech industry. Maybe there's an AI bubble coming up and building up over the next few months and years. Was there a bubble in the past to enter the trades? Just be conscious of the hype. Who's really pushing it? Why is it going on? And that's what you got to think for yourself. And that's what I teach in my career coaching, like what specifically works for you in your circumstances. Don't worry about the macro picture. UBI is coming. They're trying to make everyone unemployed, blah, blah, blah. Think about your personal situation, like where you're based in the country. Are you willing to relocate? What skills you're building? What industry you're in? What's available in your current circumstances rather than the grand narratives. And then you won't get caught up in the hype. The same way people like to make jokes about someone being dumb enough to invest in an NFT that gets rug pulled, or a meme coin that goes nowhere and it's a crypto scam. Some of these narratives are scams, right? Like some people who, to give another random example, some people who went into the vegan thing and then they got really sick, or they really suffered from like health deficiencies and mineral deficiencies because it wasn't right for them, but they got caught up in that narrative. So be careful what narratives you're getting caught up in. And we just mentioned the red pill too. When I think the red pill early days, I don't know how many of you guys remember names like Roosh V and people earlier on. You might say they make valid points or certain things about building self-confidence, self-development and self-improvement. Those are valid, but then it kind of got co-opted by people who have, you know, links to 3-letter agencies like a Myron Gaines and people like that who may have different beliefs or different agendas they're pushing. So that's why I'm very skeptical when things go mainstream. Why is the system allowed it to go mainstream, and why they're pushing it so aggressively? Darius says American tech AI wages can hire 3 H1Bs from higher birth rate countries. Yeah, that's what they're doing. So yeah, you've got to be careful. Like I say, you go into the tech industry, then they're hiring migrant workers. And not just tech. I know people working in engineering, people working in sales, and then other tech roles, and they're hiring so many H1Bs or just migrants in general to do these jobs for lower cost. And it's lower quality work getting done, but the company doesn't care as it's just barely good enough for what they want, and they would rather pay employees less. Jurassic Thunder says, I'm investing my money in stocks, creating my own business-to-business digital marketing AI business. Also, I have a side hustle software business on top of that, and I have a successful music career. F Mitches get money. Yeah, definitely. You should focus on, it depends what works for you. I don't know your personal circumstances, but yeah, definitely like one main job and 1 or 2 side hustles, whatever you have enough time for. And then you just feel more confident in your life, you have less anxiety about your income. have more autonomy of your life. That's what I think are great things. Even if you're working more and spending your weekends working, you're a bit more in control of things, and you don't have to put up with your corporate boss's BS all day. So let's go through the next little clip. Before we do that, 1 second. Yeah, and before I move on to the next clip, I think another thing to focus on is get low, right? Get low is like, I'll put it in the chat. I mean, this is just a slang way of saying something, but if you get low, what I mean by that is like, don't get caught off guard, you know, financially in this messed up fake economy. The same way you don't want to get caught up in psyops and all this negative hype about one thing or another, political extremism, things like that. You don't want to get caught up in this messed up, fake, rigged economy by heading in a direction that doesn't work for you. Playing the social status game by having an expensive wedding, an overpriced house, things like this, right? You're dealing with a flooded job market, very difficult realities. You've got to get low and stay out of dodge from people's negativity. People, I've dealt with this many times. That's why I bring it up on my channel, where you just end up dealing with so-called friends or family members or co-workers who are generally negative. Misery loves company, and they spread their negativity towards you. You got to be careful around that. That's why, like, you're making smart financial decisions, smart social decisions, so you survive this broken society and broken economy. That's kind of what I'm teaching, right? So avoid the complete mess by getting low, staying out of the dodge, being in the cut, however you want to word it. And that's like a collection of the reasons why things are so difficult and why you have to kind of stay out the way. Now we've got a funny tangent that Anton goes on that I thought would be funny to include here. He's talking about this broken economy, this broken society, and how men are most impacted by the broken dynamics, but women are getting a lot of the attention. Let's listen to him here.
There are a lot of women. I get the videos all day long. They need to change TikTok into Big Talk. They need to change TikTok into Big Talk, because these people are begging on the end. Oh my God. Me and my son, and then you see the baby seat in the back and some little leg kicking in the back. Me and my son, we're 3 days away from being homeless. Me and my son, we're 3 days away from being homeless. And this is what they doing now. And you know, if I can just get 1,000 people to send me $1, I'm able to keep rent and a roof over my head. That's what they doing. Or they'll say, you know, if I could just get the girlies to make this video viral and I could get monetized, and then hopefully I'll gather enough money from this viral video to be able to pay my rent. Or they put out that type of video when they put on a tank top and something succulent where their nipples is poking out. And then I'll look in the comments. I'll look in the comments for those type of videos. And it's always a guy. Always some guys in there that's like, not every man is toxic. Because they'll be like, oh man, I got kicked out of my house and my child's father, he left me. And it's always a simp every single time. Not all men are toxic. DM'd you with the hearts emoji. I love and hate the internet all the same. Not all men are toxic. What's going on, Queen? Oh my God. Man, that's crazy. You make my eyes hurt. You shine so bright.
So this is what happens. Sometimes we make jokes on my channel about the begging woman on social media. Like he says, beg talk, not TikTok. The crying woman on TikTok. But many people are actually out there simping. We might laugh at it, but there's other guys out there sending them messages, sending them money, things like that. And the truth is, when you see people crying out on TikTok, often they're not looking for real solutions. They're just looking for sympathy and empathy, right? And again, we're seeing a common thread here where you have a mix of a dysfunctional society and a broken economy kind of coming together with these gender dynamics playing out in the workplace, right? And the thing is, men can't get away with that. You can't go and beg for opportunities online, beg for sympathy online. You're not going to get the special treatment a lot of these women are. Now, let's go through some of the top comments. Rasta Webet Beach says, I've been an electrician for 20 years and I've never sat at home. Today, we're actually short-handed. So again, electrician, based on where he's located, is highly in demand. TX Forever says, I work 2 jobs, 1 full-time, 55 hours a week plus my part-time job, 8 hours every Sunday, only 1 day off every week. Keep going, man. We got this. So again, that's what I mean about not giving up. Because sometimes I do see comments on different channels, sometimes on my channel, where guys are just giving up, right? And I'm not saying you have to go super hard and be like, to work non-stop, 2 jobs, no sleep, things like that. But this guy's doing a lot. He's working 2 jobs. One's a full-time 55-hour per week, and then the other job is part-time. He's working on Sundays too, has 1 day off on a Saturday. So he's really trying to make his most to put himself in the best place financially. Then we've got someone here called, where was I going to go? King High Tech. He says, the one right here, so many excuses. The bottom line is the job market is terrible. No one wants to make a career pivot after spending 4 to 6 years in college getting a degree. 1 minute is go get a degree in a STEM field. The next moment is start working in the trades. It seems like you change your opinion every now and again. And then people say facts, just or say go start a business, things like that. The point is, this is what I'm saying about not getting caught up in the hype, because you're going to be like, oh, I watch a couple of YouTube videos, they say work in the trade, so I'm going to do that. That's why when I work with my clients one-on-one, I look at their specific circumstances rather than just thinking, oh, what's the latest hype? What's the latest talking point on social media? That's why, honestly, my channel could be doing better and I'm going to keep working to make it better, but I don't jump on the hype of like, oh, let me tell everyone to work here, go and get a STEM degree, because that might not be the right option for you. It really does depend. Now we're going to move on to the next video. Okay, keep leaving comments if you have any other views. Here we go. Before I move on to the next video clip. Someone said, so we've got electrodynamic orb. Electrodynamic orb. Says never listen to the herd. The herd is never right. Exactly, right? So it's the same thing with investing. Of course, not investment advice, but if everyone's talking about, oh, gold is so good, gold is hitting market highs, right? Everyone should be buying gold. No, you shouldn't be an idiot and buy gold when everyone's talking about gold. You buy gold if you want to buy it, not investment advice, when no one's talking about it and people saying it's pointless, it's just a chunk of metal. And then if you buy it then when everyone hypes it up, it's going to go up dramatically and you can sell or just keep it. And it's going to keep appreciating over time, right? Same thing with gold. Same thing applies for careers. If you see a niche in your industry, maybe working in a fintech startup, don't go and announce it to everyone. Go and work on it quietly. That's how people really build wealth. Everything's done quietly. I know people making 7 figures a year in internet digital marketing, and I know people says that's a hype, that's an exaggeration, it's a bit like drop shipping, but of course there are successful drop shippers, there are successful people who run digital marketing agencies. We can't write them all off, and they're not all going to announce how they're making their money, what they're doing. They're not going to go through all the details. They might sell some courses online and things like that, but there are people who do it. And the whole point is, you know, not following the trends, figuring out what works for you and doing it low key, right? Get low, like I say. And people, you think people are going to be helpful and support you, but often they're not. Jurassic Thunder says, just learn to trade, bro. It's just like just learn to code, bro. And that's what I'm saying. People got to think independently, right? So we're all on the same page here. You got to think about what works for you. Do you know how ridiculous it would sound to some of my former co-workers that like I said on one of my YouTube posts, no one in real life knows about my YouTube channel. I haven't mentioned it to one person in real life. I just say I'm still working my normal office job, or I'm working from home for now, or whatever. But I don't go into it, because do you think they're going to get it? They're going to be like, that's crazy, because I found a unique solution that works for me. The unique solution that might work for you could be on Instagram. It could be on Twitter. It could be just having your own website and SEO optimize that for your particular niche. It could be going into, like I say, fintech startups, which I thought was quite interesting, and I was going to head to an earlier point in my career. But the whole point is, when everyone gets it, it's already, the hype is already over, right? It's already like people are flooding into it. You're going to have the dumb dumbest type of people in that industry. I covered in one of my early videos, I think 6 to 8 months ago, about Google, if I remember correctly. It was talking about, it was about a year ago. It was about Google, and it was about a management consultant who's working at Google. And what he said was, when he worked at Google in the earlier years, you had a lot of independent thought, a lot of people who just focus on making the company work, innovation, entrepreneurship. But over time, it got flooded with more of the kind of corporate normies. And then it just became lots of pointless bureaucracy. And that's what happens with everything, right? You see it when people jump on a hype, it just becomes redundant and it loses all meaning, right? And I've seen that with so many things in culture. It's like when a music artist goes mainstream and they start dumbing down their music. Someone says, just plumb a toilet, bro. Yeah, some people go into plumbing and things like that. I do know people making good money doing that, by the way, but yeah, it's not for everyone. The free money showed us that woman's true colors. Now this disastrous economy will show us what they've done before we had the internet to know. Yeah, so that's Jurassic Thunder. Yeah, I agree that, you know, money printing, feminism, women seeing showing their true nature on social media, things like that has made things worse. So we're going to go back to a new set of videos, someone called Fads, who's talking about women are landing jobs. So why are many men still jobless? Why can't many men find jobs? So we've got a series of a few short clips. Let's listen to this one here.
Something like this. Corporations have been trying to churn out girl bosses to intentionally spite men. And I was not quite convinced, to be honest. I don't think there's a secret plot to churn out girl bosses. And unsurprisingly, there are much more reasonable explanations for what's going on here. Despite this idea of unemployment being really high, almost always healthcare, right? American people have just been getting really, really old. 1 in 5 Americans is projected to be 65 years or older by 2030. In 1930, this number was 1 in 20. We're now at the point where the US population is so old that Americans spend more on healthcare than they do on groceries and housing. It's only projected to get worse as Americans get older and older. But these factors have all helped to prop up a little bit of unemployment for women specifically, because they dominate the healthcare industry to much higher degrees than men. In the 1990s, when the top employer was manufacturing, this did wonders for male unemployment and helped keep them in jobs. And thankfully, unemployment should be coming right back down, because the US is going to get tons of new manufacturing jobs, screwing in little screws into iPhones any minute now, okay? Any minute now. Except that wouldn't really help, to be honest, because the US actually already has a massive shortfall in manufacturing jobs. Nearly 500,000 open jobs.
So that was a short clip. We've got another clip coming up from this guy in a moment. But let's talk about what he's saying. So firstly, he's basically saying that, you know, lots of guys on Twitter, as you'd expect, right-wing, more leaning that way, they're going to say, oh, well, corporations, they're part of the fertility problem. They've got girl bosses that they're brainwashing to spite men. And there's a lot to be said about this, right? I do think, yes, the birth rate collapse is partly caused by pushing women into the workplace, encouraging men to, you know, not be in the workplace through the biased hiring practices, which lowers the birth rate. Also, I have worked, again, at other investment banks where they do push these hard line brainwashing for the female employees. Like, I remember, and you can look up this term, I'll put it in the chat, right? Duluth model. There's some crazy brainwashing they have for the woman in the workplace, right? There's something called the Duluth model. You can look it up. It's like a circular diagram. And what it is it basically determines that almost anything a man does could be deemed mistreatment of a woman, right? I won't use the word, you know, DV or ABU, whatever, misusing a woman, things like that. Almost anything, a man says anything critical of a woman, that's emotional mistreatment, things like that. So when you have all this brainwashing for women to go to their feminist network, their women's networking events and empowerment groups and things like that at work, there's so much brainwashing on and on that, yeah, it does kind of reduce the birth rate, and it does destroy gender dynamics between men and women, right? And it's like a woman are focused on workplace presentations and spreadsheets and things like that, instead of having kids and serving their husbands and things like that, right? So it's all by design. The system does want things to collapse. They want the birth rate to collapse, and they want your living standards to fall, all for the sake of a lot of girl boss nonsense. So I don't think it's necessarily this big conspiracy, but there is something valid to be said here you know. And what's interesting here is this guy, just based on the background, it says that he's John Byrne Murdoch, columnist and chief data report at Financial Times. So again, and this has 400,000 subscribers or followers. So this again makes me intrigued. Why are we allowed to have this opinion publicly available on the Financial Times, which is typically, you know, more left-wing leaning in terms of at least being pro-feminist? But now we're allowed to point out that having more girl bosses, having more feminists in the workplace is not productive for a country's health and the birth rate. And why is that? And I always think the reason and the time when you're allowed to be, say, politically incorrect things is when it's already too late. Now everyone's allowed to be critical of feminism. Why? Because it's already too late. The birth rate's already collapsed. If you're going to increase the birth rate, it's going to take 10 to 20 years to do it, through undoing the brainwashing, changing economic policies, things like that, things that they're probably not going to do. But if they were going to do it, it'd be too late to fix it. It's really gone in the wrong direction for too many decades. Now, then we go through that second clip we went through, which was here. In that second little clip I was showing there, he was talking about the aging population and how people should go into healthcare. Like I've mentioned a few times in this video, going into healthcare will help you make more money because there's more of an aging population. And of course, you might not want to do the kind of lower class, demeaning work, working as a nurse, you know, cleaning out the sick patients' bedpans and things like that, and cleaning up their little space. But what you might want to do is be in a highly technical field element of the healthcare industry where it could work out for you. The other thing is Trump thinking about sending manufacturing back to the US. This is completely unrealistic, right? Because the labor cost would be so high. And you'd have to hire people to make cars in Detroit. Imagine if they relaunched the car manufacturing plants in America. I mean, each car would cost like $100,000 because you know, the cost of labor would be so high. So it's just not realistic. It's these delusions that they're pushing to waste your time, really. Things are just going to be in a very difficult spot for the foreseeable future. And just before I move on, I just want to focus on that because I see and uncovered it in a few videos that are coming up in the next few week or so. A lot of these people who are like, I'm pro-nationalist, I really support my country. A lot of these people are not hiring their own countrymen and their own workers. I see many of these, let's just go there, some Americans who'd be like, yeah, I voted for Trump. Yeah, I support Trump. Or they're politically active people like Grant Cardone, who's a real estate investor who super supports Trump. But then he says, oh, we need more migrant workers. I'm outsourcing work outside of the US because the American workers are lazy. These are the same guys that are saying they're America first and they sort of support America. I know someone else who runs their own business and they're super like, yeah, everyone needs to respect America and integrate with us and assimilate with our beliefs. And then it's like they're hiring cheap labor from like the Philippines to do a lot of work for cheap. So it's like, are you really a nationalist if you're outsourcing work when you are quite wealthy and you could hire a local worker to do that work, but no, you hire cheap labor in a third world country to help you grow your business? So there's lots of hypocrisy there. But let's go through the next clip.
Of changes at a population level. There's been this thing that's been happening since the pandemic called the K-shaped recovery. And it's created a situation where some parts of the economy are doing extremely well, while other parts are stagnating. And if you look at the overall picture, it seems like the economy is doing generally pretty healthy, but rather what's happened is that a really large group is left behind, while another group, which is much smaller, has rocketed ahead. The K-shaped economy is the idea that you can get two headlines like this within a few weeks of each other. S&P 500 and NASDAQ rally to record highs, but also late credit card payments have hit a record high. And the same story is playing out in education as well. For a long time, like going to university gave you what was called the college wage premium. You get a degree, you're going to earn more, which is why people go to school, if we're honest. What's happened in recent years is that the college wage premium has become bigger for some group of people and smaller for another group of people. Going to college has become regressive, offering more to kids the richer they are. Instead of a degree giving you this almost guaranteed bonus in wages, it really is just like a multiplier on the social status that your family already has. And in this paper, they actually explain.
So it's quite interesting what he's saying. What he's talking about is a polarized economy. You have the rich and the poor and no one in the middle. Like we always talk about there being no middle class, right? It's either you own assets and you can avoid inflation through that, or you don't own assets and you're desperately trying to invest with what little money you have, and you have lack of job security, so you might not be investing as much as you want. Then he talks about the college wage premium, whereby, you know, there's a lack of social mobility, where if you go to the right colleges, you have the right network from your family connections and your friend connections, you end up in the top jobs. Whereas other people like me who managed to get into some of those top jobs, he said it's a bit difficult because you don't have that network, and so much of it does depend on your social network in real life and the connections you have. So it can be quite difficult. So it is a very interesting dynamic here. Okay, let's go through some of the comments here. So we've got a comment from you guys in the here. We got Jonathan Glimmer Picon, who says, don't be on the internet begging for help. No one's going to save you. Yeah, that's very true. And then we've got a few top comments here. Where are the comments? I was going to react to some of these. Let me just find it. Yeah, Joshua David says, my experience is that you need social connections to land top jobs. You can't just apply to 100 jobs and expect a job, let alone an interview. Women tend to have larger social networks. So what you're saying is that women are more likely to get jobs because they have a lot of connections, or basically people who are in higher social classes in general tend to have more connections. So they end up making more money through that way. Then we've got Nick Majrick, who is saying, you're effed if you don't get a degree. You're effed if you do get a degree, because you'll be in debt for the rest of your life, like 95% of the time, even if you get a higher paying job. And that's a big if. Someone says here, which is a good comment, best thing to do is spend a few thousand on certifications and training programs. Feed your experience into ChatGPT and tell it to cater the job listings. I wouldn't necessarily say the ChatGPT thing. What I would say is that you should really, I know it's hard to do when you're younger in your career and you're younger trying to figure out what you want to study, but don't go into like excessive higher education, like doing masters, doing PhDs. Get a solid degree from a decent university and get loads of experience, as much experience as you can, as early as you can, whether it's spending a year placement in the industry, or spending internships at the companies, things like that. You know, that's what I did. That helped me. I did 2 summer internships. I had to apply to hundreds of them. I didn't have connections, but that helped me. A European investment bank at a financial data analytics firm, and that helped me get jobs in the industry. And this is what you need to do when you're early on. Do a decent degree and get as experienced as you can, as young as you can. Now, if we continue going through this, we've got the next clip here, next article here. So I want to dive deeper into something that's coming up, you know, in the comments, coming up in my videos, and in the topic of this video is essentially men who are dropping out of the work and study, right? So we've got somewhere here, it says, researchers delve into inkwells, I don't even know if we like to say it on the platform, rejections of work and study, right? And it's saying that researchers analyze online forum conversations from men that is saying that men don't want to work, they don't want to study, and there's a bit of peer pressure encouraging them not to. Let me zoom in a bit. Here it says, recent surveys have shown that a disproportionately high percentage, about 30% of young men, are not in employment, education, or training. They're NEETs, right? Which is that term I mentioned before, N-E-E-T. I'm sure some of you know it. And what he's saying here is that it's basically saying 30% of young men have dropped out of society. And the reason why that's a big issue, because eventually what are these men are going to do? Are they going to stay at home, read some books, work out, hit the gym, play video games? And eventually after that, they're going to read philosophy books. They're going to research how the system works. Many of them have done that already, and they're going to rebel, right? Which I don't condone, of course. Only peaceful solutions in this society, of course. But the whole point is, it's really showing how the social dysfunction can be found online until it becomes kinetic and happens in the real world. It says researchers analyzed over 1,200 comments online on employment and 170 discussion threads on popular forums, and they found out this back in 2022. Then it says here, this peer pressure makes unemployment a badge of honor rather than a problem to be solved. And these online spaces reinforce these ideas. And basically what it's saying is when you have the neat space or men dropping out, men on internet forums, they're all disillusioned about the world together. So they all up saying, oh, let's just give up on the system. What's the point working the job? There's a group identity in being unemployed. They're not being a wage debt slave, right? Not being the simp boyfriend, not being the guy in a dead-end marriage. Is better than the normal alternative. It's just dropping out of society, not working, just living life on your own terms, surviving with what little you have. And I think, like I said, that's going to become a growing trend because systems deliberately excluding a lot of men from a healthy dynamic in this society. Then we have this comment, well, this next section here, it says there's a need for a multi-pronged approach to reintegrate young men back into society. The researchers suggest that encouraging these young men to consider changing will require a multi-layered approach, right? Let me just get the quote I was looking for. The long-term change will require challenging harmful narratives about masculinity, relationships, and success. Instead of punishing young men or banning their communities outright, you need to help them to reintegrate into society to be more effective. And look at the sources. Look at the sources or some kind of don't work for soy society, right? That is hilarious, right? I think that was the name of their study. I'm going to put it in the chat. This is hilarious. Don't work for society. I love the internet. I love all the parts of the internet where you're not supposed to be, where people can have free speech, you know. But anyway, let's go into this in more detail. What she's saying is to reintegrate these men into society to be more effective is basically saying you need to brainwash them and say the trash social contract that I've covered in my other videos of why would these men want to participate in society. You have to brainwash them and say, oh, it's a decent deal. Oh, you know, it should be a decent deal to be in a marriage that might not work out, with a girlfriend who might walk all over you, with a job you might lose at any moment, with socialize with a society that can cancel you for the wrong opinion at any moment, and destroy your life, and then maybe take a photo or record you and then put that online so you can never recover from that cancellation. So you basically, they're saying if you want a young men to get reintegrated into society, we have to brainwash them. And I think it's too late for that. The bridge has been burned permanently, and you're just going to see society is going to continue to marginalize men for several decades, and men are going to find out solutions themselves, building offline communities, building off-the-grid communities, looking at self-employment after spending some time in corporate. These are all things I kind of covered throughout my career coaching, which kind of extends to financial freedom, time freedom, and living life on your own terms, right? So it's kind of over for society. I don't think it's over for men because men are quite resourceful, but it is over for society trying to integrate a lot of men, especially young men. Interesting comment here. What's considered a young man? I want to be retired by 40 to 45. Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, I think in this context, I'm using the term young men instead of using the I word, inkwell, which I don't know if you can say it here or know what's going on. But I would just say men in general. This is about young men being neat, not in education, employment, or training, just being outside the workforce. Let's just say 20 to 25. But for what you're saying and what I'm saying, it really applies to men of all age groups, right? It's really that men want to live life on their own terms and not play by society's rules. So I think that has nothing to do with age. So yeah, if you want to be retired by 40 to 45, if you invest, if you have side income, side hustles you're working for, minimalism. And I always say on my channel, you got to combine two. I think in the past, you could do one, like maybe work a high paying corporate job and just invest that. You can still do that to a certain extent if you've got a high salary and you're not in a high tax jurisdiction. But in many cases, for most people who might not have the higher income, you have to combine two. So you have to combine like a side hustle and minimalism, or you combine investing and minimalism, and then you can retire early and have your time freedom and financial freedom. Or you go super hard on one thing, one side hustle till it makes tons of money while you're maintaining minimalism. But even then you're maintaining minimalism, right? So it comes back to that. It comes back to living within your means dramatically, or living abroad, right? Where you can get higher living standards for lower cost of living, right? So That's another way of doing it. And it depends on your circumstances. You know, I'm doing my self-employment thing as a career coach online. You might be working a corporate job that's paying well, and that's going to help you out. Okay, we're going to move on to another interesting article about young men dropping out of society. Okay, let me zoom in. Okay, so this is about most young men are single in 2025. Most young women are not single. And that goes back to the infamous statistic that you've probably seen around at the graph, where it's probably a bit of an exaggerated number, but it says that 70% of young men are single, but about 35% of women are single. So you've got almost double the rate of women who are not single versus men. So like what it suggests is that men are single and women are sleeping around with the same handful of guys. Recent studies show that more than 60% of young men are flying solo. The situation isn't improving. The writer says, I'm not surprised. I feel every day there is a think piece, a TV show that is dedicated to spouting misandry. And misandry is basically anti-male propaganda, like misogyny, but misandry is anti-male. And then I'm fine with it because I used to look at most things with an objective lens. But young men in his early 20s, it might be a little hurtful. And that's the thing. It's not easily reversible, all this anti-male propaganda that has been going on for the last few decades. There's going to be resentment amongst men. I know I don't give an F about this society, and I'm sure many of you don't. You want to live life on your own terms. So when that happens, you know, this society's really burned the bridge with many men, right? It's going to maybe try to reintegrate the men, but even if it does, it's not going to work. That's my opinion. That's why my channel, even though my channel is contrarian, my views are contrarian, my view will win out in the long term. There'll be a short-term pushback where society will be like, oh, we'll cancel DEI, less woke agenda, less feminism, things like this. Oh, men are unhappy, they're isolated, they're lonely, and they'll give you a really shit deal. They'll give you a really trash deal. They'll give you a really useless deal to reintegrate into society, and then you're going to realize this is not a good deal. Let me go back and listen to Economics Ethan and other people like him and find a solution that is better than what society is offering me in the mainstream. There's another, oh, I didn't mean to click that. Let me go back. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. So 1 second. It says this. Most relationship advice is targeted at benefiting women. This is no surprise because women spend $20 trillion in consumer spending. So again, the economy is biased in favor of women, not only the corporate environment where you work, but also the spending environment, the consumer environment. You know, there's a statistic out there that women make 80% of all spending decisions where they dictate to their husbands and their boyfriends what to spend money on. Many men, hopefully now over time, are being more single and they're making those decisions independently. But still, a lot of the economy is based on what do women want? What do women agree with? Because they're spending more. They're more of the consumers, right? And they're an economic priority for the system. Can you imagine right now if tomorrow they started making the economy more tailor-made to men? Well, men are more minimalist. Men are more focused on self-sufficiency. And if women start serving men more, let's just say women start cooking more meals for men, then you know what industry is going to collapse first? The food delivery industry, the meal prep industry, Uber Eats, Grubhub, all the local food delivery services, Deliveroo, things like that, Just Eat, whichever one's local to you, right? In Latin America, I think they have Rapido and Rappi and different ones like that. But the point is, right, a lot of this industry is based on consumer culture, which is based on women working, right? It's not based on women doing things that would be considered benefiting the family, even though it doesn't generate anything in the economy. So we're moving on to here. Ooh, where is it? Women are crushing. I can't find it. Crushing. There we go. Women are crushing it every day in life, right? They're out earning men in 22 different areas. They're more likely to have a college degree, and they're even making strides in the workplace and world of politics, right? But I want to cover this. This society is a failing system, but it's integrating more women into it. Now, more and more men can see and think critically about whether doing a college degree is the smart move. And I encourage you to think carefully about that. Think about your professional qualifications. Do you want to spend so much money doing an MBA if it's not going to pay off? And what's happening is society is going, men are doing the wrong thing. Men are dumb. Men are dropping out of society. Men are not studying or getting jobs. But many men are being like, the system is a scam. I'm not going to participate in it, or I'll participate in a way that benefits me, which is, again, the thing I teach in my coaching program, how to use the system. So when they say, oh, women are doing so much better than men, I'm like, no, women are being more brainwashed by the system than men, and they're becoming the useless idiots. They're becoming the frontline soldiers for propping up a failing system. So it's good that men are dropping out. So if women are out earning men, maybe that's in some of the corporate roles, but men might be investing and spending that money wisely, whereas women will be spending the money on holidays and restaurants and things like that. So in the longer term, I don't think it's men who are really losing out in this broken dynamic. So we're going to focus on financial stability right now. It says one of the most commonly cited reasons for women dating older men is financial stability. A study conducted by a dating site said that 75% of women prefer older men because they have more money, right? They have more financial stability, which is, you know, something you hear online. Oh, women date the top 20% of men that have higher social status and more money. So that's a reason, because they are making more money, right? So let me just find what I was going to say next. 1 second. And what I want to say about this is, what does this actually mean about women who are saying they're strong and independent? If women are strong and independent, then why are so many of them preferring men who have more money than them? Shouldn't they be covering the bill? Shouldn't they be paying 50-50? And I mentioned an example in one of my video series about a toxic manager. I worked with one of these liberal, effeminate, modern men, right? And he was always banging on about gender equality and how he's a male feminist and he's all of this stuff, right? And we were on the trading floor one day, and I said, oh, yeah, I believe in gender equality. And I said something about, oh, if there's a date, then men and women should pay 50-50. You know, why would the man pay more if you have gender equality? And he shouted at me, this effing male feminist. And he's like, how can you say that? Are you saying that all women care about is money? And he shouted it so loudly that the other desks around us could hear. And there was a woman working there, a couple of women working nearby, but they knew he had all these weird outbursts. He loved to be a self-righteous virtue signaler, but he was trying to damage my career or destroy my professional reputation, because I never said that. I just said men and women should pay the same on a date, right? If that's gender equality, right? But he was like, he's always white knighting for the woman. Yeah. And I covered this in a video series. You might have seen part 1 about my toxic manager. There's 4 more parts coming out. And it's just dealing with these people is just intolerable, right? And that's why you can't really blame it all on women. There's lots of simp behavior that are just difficult to deal with. Before I move on, let's go through some comments. Someone said, okay, we've done that. Avoiding work drinks. Yeah, I've got that coming up. There's another section of this live stream coming up in just a few minutes. Yeah, I've got about maybe 5-10 minutes and we'll be on that. Adam A7752 says 100% of the reason. Yeah, women prefer older men because they have more money and more stability from financial perspective. I've seen that around. Yeah. Even in developing countries, I noticed there's like an age gap because some of the older guys have a lot more money. So if we continue going through this. Men in general don't always value friendships the same way women do. For example, I joined 2 groups. Girl Gang London had about 10,000 followers, all wanted to meet up and make new female friends. The group Guy Gang London had 433 followers. Yeah, I think there's different reasons for this, right? I think there's this whole thing with the male loneliness epidemic and all of that. I think men naturally prefer their own space. Often in this society, people in general, but especially men, are encouraged to compete with every other man. Every man's competing with each other, even people who are family members and friends. There's always a passive-aggressive competition, not even healthy competition. People trying to one-up each other, use each other people to further their social status and their money. lots of transactional relationships. And I don't even mean between men and women, between men and other men using each other to further their particular goals. And it becomes quite toxic. So it makes sense why men prefer to be by themselves. They don't want to be in a hyper competitive environment all the time. And yeah, women naturally prefer to socialize and gossip and things like that. So it makes sense that have that. I think with men, you prefer more closer friendships, more depth in some of your friendships with 2 or 3 close friends, rather than just being a woman who's trying to be popular and friends with everyone else. Big groups of girls who are gossiping, and it turns into high school politics and being popular, like the cheerleaders in like Mean Girls and movies like those high school movies. So it's different dynamics there. I think the whole other thing is that, like I say, men are told to compete. It feels like you're living in a world where you're one man and you have to compete with all the globalized competition of other men in the dating market to find the right woman, to get the top job. It's not really about cooperating amongst men, or socializing is often policed amongst men because you can't have certain opinions. Again, I mentioned that liberal simp who was having a go at me, trying to cancel me at work because I talked about how men and women should pay the same for the first date. You always deal with these guys who are not really on bro code. If you have guy code or bro code, they don't do that. But women do have their hive mind and have their own beliefs and, you know, support each woman. And men don't really do it in the same way. They don't really gang up to support each other. And, you know, you have to, I remember people like Kevin Samuels talking about tribe up. I'll put it in the comments. I think he said it. I think other people have said things like this. Tribe up. Kevin Samuels. There's a term called tribe up, which is basically men in small groups are quite efficient. If you look at any revolution, any movement, it's normally a small group of 5 to 20 guys at the top who are really making things happen, and all the other men follow their orders. Now, the same can apply if you can have healthy friendships. Now, I've experienced people who can be quite negative and gossipy. There are good people too, of course, but you have to be careful that people are looking out for your best interest. They're not just taking all the information you have and stealing it, using for their benefit, gossiping about you behind closed doors. You really have to kind of find a solution that works for you. And what I mean by that is, essentially, if you're going to have a tribe of close friends, make sure you're all looking out for each other. And it is great to have that. If you have similar hobbies, similar goals in fitness and finance and things like that, that will definitely help you. And be careful about some of these big groups you can find online, like, oh, let's go to a running club. Let's go to a Facebook group called Guy Gang London. You're going to be around complete strangers. You don't know if they actually care about your interest, or they're just trying to be popular and just have a generic lighthearted friendship. So let's move on. Here it says here, a 2021 Gallup poll found that American men are experiencing a friendship recession. Nearly 1 in 6 men don't have a close friend. The proportion says that those that have at least 6 close friends has plunged by half. So only about 27% of men say they have close friends and things like that. So essentially, a lot of men don't have close friends, which is probably a valid point based on what I'm saying. Let me know in the comments how you feel about your friendships. And I think there's a big difference between friendships and acquaintances. You know, friendships versus acquaintances. Let me get that spelling right. You might know loads of people. You might have co-workers, you know, or friends of families that you know, friend of the family and things like that. But how many of your friends are really your close friends? And I think it's normally 1 or 2, if we're honest. And I consider a friendship is who you can call in the middle of the night if you really needed help. There's pretty much no one, right? Or it's like, you know, maybe 2 or 3 people maximum. So most people are just people, you know, right? They don't really care. And I think what he's talking about here is men not having close friendships. It goes back to, you know, running theme throughout this live stream, which is you have broken economy and broken social dynamics, right? So it's at the end of the day, this is the new normal. It's like struggling for socioeconomic stability, not even like, oh, how can I have a marriage or a family? People are just struggling to have some of the basics for stability between social dynamics in the economy. And it seems like a deliberate attempt by the system. It doesn't want the uprising. It doesn't want men gathering in coffee shops or pubs and organizing to take over a system that has failed and corrupt. It wants people, it wants divide and conquer between race, between gender, between men amongst themselves. So everyone's isolated and easy to control. And that's what it seems like, you know. Let's move on to, before I move on to the final topic, You can see link in description is my career coaching program. And there is a Black Friday sale that's on right now, 20% discount for the first 5 clients. Leave some more comments in the live chat. I will respond to you. I just realized that I need to add something to my tabs. So I'm trying to find it. If you just give me a minute, but let me know, say whatever you want to say in the comments. I'll respond to it in a moment. Let me just find this one little PDF I was going to go through. Oh, wow. Where is it? 1 second. I'm gonna have to find this. I thought I had this already. 1 second. Let me get this ready. Okay, I've got what I need. Now, in this part of the live stream, what I want to do is cover why you should avoid work drinks or be careful about your behavior there, because you need to be careful that no one's trying to sabotage you or use you or manipulate you in a lot of those dynamics. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this in a bit of detail. Firstly, why do you need to maintain your privacy at work, right? So you want to maintain your privacy at work because you want to essentially ensure that people aren't taking advantage of you. You want to stay sober. You want to stay sober. Okay, we've got one comment, one super chat. Thanks for the super chat, $5 from Adam. Bought a washer and dryer, joked with the salesman about marriage being a scam, and he gave me a discount. There are base men out there. Yeah, it's quite funny because I feel like people, the worse things get, the more they can be honest about how dysfunctional things are. I was walking past a construction site and I heard quite a few guys talking about drinking raw milk. And I don't know if you know about raw milk being kind of a popular trend on the right wing, online, on Twitter and places like that. So yeah, the worst things get, people will be like, people are going to be less and less inclined to play the politically correct approach. They'll say, yeah, we do need stronger borders. We need less migrants. I'm sick of the government censoring everything. Divorce is quite high. Marriage doesn't work. I don't believe in some of the mainstream advice on health, things like that. So that's what ends up happening when people get pushed too far, particularly maybe in the trades, guys who are more inclined to be a bit more politically incorrect and they don't have to, you know, play the corporate game. So let's go through why you need privacy at work, right? So you want to stay sober, you want to avoid alcohol at work drinks, because if you avoid saying too much, you avoid giving people ammo to, like, you know, buck back at you and have a go at you and find information about your personal life or little silly things you might do if you are drunk to leverage against you. People are always lulling you into a false sense of comfort, false sense of friendship. And that's what you think when you're at work and you're tired. And it's easy to say, it's easier said than done, because you're at work, you're tired, you worked a whole work day, then they have work drinks or a Christmas party and things like that. And then you're tired and maybe you drink more than you should, you say more than you should. That's why I recommend, and I'll go through some advice here, where if you're going to work drinks, arrive on time, stay for one drink and leave. Don't drink any alcohol. Don't let people be too fake nice with you. They're trying to extract information out of you. It's a completely fake, artificial environment. So be extra careful with it, right? So like I say, you want to avoid loose talk, avoid saying too much about your personal life. That'll be used as ammo to sabotage you so other people can gossip about you. They want you to let your guard down, to ridicule you later. And they're playing the long game of sabotage, not the short-term game of friendship. Then we've got another part here about guarding yourself. You know, you want to say less. Don't let coworkers push you to open up too much to ridicule you later, like I say. And then the thing is, there's a lot of an office circus. And what I mean by office circus is that other employees who might be more favorites with the management or more popular, they're allowed to get away with more things. You know, that's why you have a circus at work. You have co-workers who are getting drunk, who are flirting, who are causing scenes, maybe getting into scuffles with each other, play fighting or flirting, or doing inappropriate things with co-workers, politically incorrect jokes. But if you do it, you're the one who's going to get cancelled and fired and reported to HR, right? So you have to be careful, right? That you don't want to cause a scene that's going to ruin your reputation. And then you've got other people who get caught up in that. And what you don't want to do is do that. And I remember an instance working at a European investment bank where it was a bit less formal than the American investment bank. And you had instances where women would, how do I say it nicely, pull their skirt up as a joke when they were drunk. You'd had two male co-workers who almost got into a serious argument and fight because they were drunk. And then the manager had to, address it in the office the day after. It was super weird stuff. That's why you have to be so careful who you're around. And then the other thing is about a polite exit, which is whereby you're leaving early from the work drinks. And you can always say, oh, I've got a family meeting tonight, or my family are visiting, so I've got to head off early. I've got an early start in the morning. I have a prior commitment outside of work, or I've got to help like a younger family member this evening. I'm teaching them, helping them with their maths. They've got a math exam coming up. You can come up with all type of BS excuses. And the goodest thing is to have one consistent excuse, like, oh yeah, I help my nephew out on Thursdays when typically work drinks are happening, so I have to leave early, or something like that. And the thing is, if you do go, like I say, keep it brief and leave once the drinks turn sloppy, the drinking turns sloppy. And what I mean by that is, firstly, as you can see from the image, people are watching each other, gathering information, gathering gossip. You don't want to be the joke in the office the day after where people are making jokes about you. And if you do go, keep it brief. And what I mean by that, I've been to many Christmas work drinks where people drink too much and then they end up doing embarrassing things like I just mentioned. You don't want to be sticking around for all of that. And people are making embarrassing moves. People are maybe flirting or being inappropriate, and then you're around it and it's not clear how you're meant to react, or you should stick around. Just aim to kind of maintain your freedom and get out of there when you feel like it's just too late and not much is happening and it's not benefiting your career. Couple of things to remember about work drinks. Firstly, it's not really mandatory. Work drinks are optional, no matter how much they pretend that you have to be there. That your company doesn't own your time. They don't own your evenings. Your evenings are yours. Your free time is yours. Whenever you want to leave, that's up to you. You don't have to explain all the details to your coworkers. They don't own you or your time, right? So they don't own anything outside of office workers, outside of your office hours. So you shouldn't feel obligated to stay there super late. The other thing is you want to focus on peace over problems. A big thing I focus on my channel is, having that peace of mind, living away from the dysfunctional society. Drinks usually create drama and there's not many benefits for you to staying there. You have very little to gain at a work drink session apart from networking with maybe some of your coworkers, senior members of the team, senior members of the department. So you want to create a rapport with management, rapport with your coworkers. But beyond that, there's nothing needed there. So what I would say is, and I've helped one of my clients who worked in the engineering sector a few weeks ago with this. He didn't want to go to some networking event, but I said, listen, if you've got a goal of like 2 top managers you can only speak to then because they're so busy in the office, go there, have a good chat with them, maybe 1 drink with them. You don't have to drink alcohol, maybe drink orange juice, have a chat with them, make sure you've got a good rapport with them. And then after about an hour, you can leave. Right? Because you don't need to stick around until everyone gets drunk and venting and complaining about their job and their personal life. But at least you're in the good books of the manager, and that 1 extra hour you spent outside of work, after work at the work drinks, is actually paying off, right? It's actually a good use of your time now. Now, the other thing is you have little to gain, right? Like I say, at best, you're going to build a minor rapport, but oversharing will sabotage your career. And what's a good example of this? A good example of this is an instance that happened that was real, where a employee at an accounting firm said that he was speaking with a senior manager. They were drinking a beer at one of these work networking events, and he just mentioned casually, oh, my girlfriend, she's moving to another city for work. And then the manager instantly said, oh, well, if she's moving to another city, you're probably going to leave the company soon, aren't you? So this is what I mean by accidentally saying too much, and then, oh no, now your manager's figured out your game plan. You're going to quiet quit at your job. You're going to put in less effort, or you're going to ask him for a transfer to move to another office in that location. If they don't have any offices, you're going to leave the company, right? So this is the thing. You've got to be careful what information are you sharing, and how could something as innocent as your girlfriend moving to another town to work is going to impact your job security. And it's kind of crazy because they can push you out. They can give your work to other people because they know you're going to leave. You don't want to sabotage your own career progress at a company. Just think 2 or 3 steps ahead. How are people going to react to the information you're sharing, even if it's not a controversial, politically incorrect opinion? So we've got 2 scenarios to run through. Let's run through scenario 1 and then scenario 2, and it will conclude the live stream. So let me know, leave a comment. You've got 27 people watching. Click like, leave a comment because I will respond to any comments. Click like, leave a comment. We got 2 more sections left and then we'll move on. So click like and leave a comment. So we've got 2 more scenarios about how going to work drinks cannot end well, right? Firstly, we've got leaving early and leaving peacefully. Adam attends a co-worker's birthday party before going home early. The co-worker is putting pressure on him to drink loads of alcohol. He refuses. He has 1 drink, he stays for 1 hour, and then he leaves. Now, that's a smart rule. I know you're going to have a lot of work drinks over the next few weeks because of Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's, things like that. What you should do is just, if you're going to learn one thing from this, is that you go to work drinks, you attend on time, you have 1 drink, and maybe you hang around for about 1 hour and then you leave because you have one of those reasonable excuses I mentioned earlier. Other employees could stay, they get drunk. There's lots of drama, gossip, and negativity. Then the day after in the office, people are hungover, they're late to work, there's dysfunctional work environment, everyone knows everyone else's personal life business, they're gossiping about it, and you avoided the drama. You're winning, you're chilling at work, doing your work, well rested, spend your evening how you want to spend it, and you did a bit of networking in that 1 hour you stayed at the work drinks. That's what you need to do, right? You don't want to let them repeatedly force you to drink. It's very annoying when they keep saying, like, I've been at work drinks and not drinking. I'm not necessarily against drinking alcohol. I have drunk alcohol before. It just doesn't interest me. So it's like when they keep saying, oh, you should have a drink. Why don't you have a drink? And it's like, I'll have an orange juice. Yeah, I'm fine with that. But it's very annoying. People think they have a right to what you consume, right? Because they want you to drink to make a fool of you, right? So set a firm boundary, get a water, get an orange juice, things like that. Leave after 1 drink and avoid the awkward work tension that others have, right? The gossip, personal stories, negative comments about each other's personal lives or families. You're going to maintain your peace. There's that phrase out there, protect your peace, right? I'm sure you've heard the phrase protect your peace. And that's what Adam's done in this instance. He's protected his peace by not getting involved in this instance. And that's what I recommend you to do. And we're going to go through the last scenario here. Scenario 2. Let's go. So let me get it all on the screen. Scenario 2. Gossip travels fast. Adam goes to work. He avoids work drinks actually on a Friday. Ben is another co-worker. He gives Adam a repeated invite. It's team building. You should really attend. If you want to be a team player, attend to these work drinks. Then he asks you to share your opinion of Carla. You say they're nice, but they don't understand work tasks. You essentially inadvertently, accidentally, just through 1 sentence, give some negative feedback of another co-worker. And then they share the gossip with that co-worker, Carla. So it's Adam, you're Adam, you're speaking with Ben. You have 1 negative comment about Carla. She doesn't really understand work tasks. And then Ben, that co-worker you thought you could trust, he goes and shares the gossip with that individual. Carla, did you know that Adam thinks you're difficult to work with? And then all of a sudden, Carla has a vendetta against you. You know that phrase, hell hath no fury as a woman with spite, right? Let me put it in the chat. It's from the Bible, I think. Hell hath no fury like a woman with spite. It's basically the idea, if you annoy a woman, she's going to have a passive aggressive grudge against you and try to undermine you. So what ends up happening to Adam is that he ends up dealing with negative performance feedback from Carla, because Carla's like, okay, I'm going to destroy that guy's reputation. He said 1 negative thing about me. She goes to your manager, says you're difficult to work with. And this is what I'm saying, right? If you're going to work, you want to remember you can't trust people. You have to learn DTA, if you're familiar with the term DTA. Let me zoom in on it now. DTA stands for don't trust anybody. If you're familiar with pro wrestling, there was a wrestler from the 90s called Steve Austin who came up, well, he made that phrase a bit more popular. I'm sure other people had it before. I'll put it in the chat. DTA, don't trust anybody. Anything you tell 1 person, they'll inevitably tell others, right? You want to focus on your long-term peace. That's more important than short-term venting. And I know how annoying it is when you're working like an 8 to 10 hour day or more, and you end up saying 1 little thing because you're a bit frustrated with a coworker who's not focused on doing the work. I dealt with it a lot. And then they go and gossip, and then everyone gets a bad reputation of you because you're saying some other coworkers ignoring your calls, not working on things. And then a lot of the venting, that you want to do to relieve your pressure because you're annoyed with a coworker, it ends up creating more pressure and conflict. So sometimes it's better just to keep it to yourself. And that's what you got to do. You got to be careful of retaliation. You say one bad thing about a coworker, they're going to retaliate if they find out. And many often times, coworkers are so bored in the office, they're always gossiping. They're taking your gossip to spread it to someone else. They're taking a gossip they hear from someone else to spread it to you. There's just, you see men behave like this too. I wouldn't say it's just a woman thing. You see this all the time. And like I say, you can't trust people. I realize in this society in general, anything you tell one person, they'll tell others. It could be some small detail. It could be some real life challenge you're dealing with. They'll be like, oh no, I've got to share that with others, got to gossip about that with others. Any short-term venting, like I say, it comes at the cost of long-term peace. It creates more conflict. For example, I remember when I started working at one investment bank, I had co-workers that were renting in a more wealthy part of London, slightly more wealthy. It's called Hemel Hempstead. It's like northeast London, if I'm getting the direction correct, or North London somewhere. And they're all rented in the same area. All the bankers and lawyers and people like that on higher salaries who didn't mind paying a lot of money in rent, they would live in a very nice part of London. And they'd pay really high amounts of rent. They'd go out for the local clubs and the night clubs and lounges and bars, and there'd always be gossiping and networking there. So I remember, I had a one bad interaction with one coworker early on in my career, the toxic manager I covered in my 5-part series coming up on the channel. And what ended up happening is, I remember that day he was mentioned going to work drinks with our manager, our team manager, and one other female co-worker. And I remember the day after, both of them were really awkward with me. And it's probably because he was giving tons of negative feedback about me to her and to the other manager. And this is what I mean. You got to be careful about like what's going on. How does the vibe change around you? Are people being randomly difficult? Did you say or do something? And now one co-worker is popular, spread a bunch of negative feedback about you. You got to be looking out for changes in the dynamics. There's a phrase in the pro wrestling industry. I'll put this in the chat because it's quite interesting. So DTA stands for don't trust anybody. I put that on the screen so you can see that. Got to be careful about trusting anyone. People like to gossip these days. The other thing is business is done at the bar, right? And this is known in the pro wrestling industry, like WWF, things like that, WWE. And what it means is that so many business alliances and people deciding how to move forward with the business is done with discussions in those informal settings, in the smoking sections next to the investment bank, in the drinking bar, the lounge, where people are discussing business ideas, working together, putting together a team, a business venture, a joint venture, things like that. And the same thing happens with the gossip. So that's why you got to be careful with the gossip. Where is it? What are people saying? How does it change dynamics with you? And that's why you can attend work drinks, even though I said avoid them. Avoid staying too late, avoid getting too dragged into the gossips, but be aware of the social dynamics around you and how that changes and how that impacts you. All right. So I'm going to go through the comments now in a moment. So like I say, career coaching program to help you deal with work drinks, to help you deal with office politics, deal with all that navigating, all of those difficult personalities, co-workers, toxic managers. Climb the ladder in an efficient way that works for you and benefits your freedom, rather than getting stuck in, all this office gossip that's going to drag you down, right? In the same way, when I started the video, you don't want to be a man who's getting caught up in these very dysfunctional dynamics where essentially you're going to be struggling to find a role that works for you, right? You want to play the long game like a pro for your career, so you're building the skills that are in demand and secure the bag when it comes to your money, right? So there is a Black Friday sale, which is going to be 20% discount for the first 5 clients across this time period. So feel free to click the link in description and book a call with me, and we can get started with career coaching. Let me go through some of the comments. Adam says, I usually talk up the team because in office, I'm all business and head down. Therefore, I pretend to be a little loose and let it slip that they're a good team member. Yeah, it's good to talk up people. And people are really, even before recent hard times with the inflation, people are really down on their luck right now. So giving some positive reinforcement really does help you. And it doesn't really harm you if you're a bit more positive about coworkers who might be, you know, dealing with stress and insecurity and worried about their job security too. Adam says, I never talk bad about coworkers. Don't rope me in this. Yeah, that's a joke because I guess the example had someone called Adam. Yeah, so I hear what you're saying there. So there we go. We're done, right? So you've got this sale that's on limited time. Prices of my coaching will go up next year. I'm going to wait around for a minute or two. If you want to leave any comments, I will respond to that. Let me just click. Yeah. So if you've got any comments, let me know. Let me know what you're doing on the weekend. I'm going to be making more videos, doing some like life admin, some meal prep, things like that, editing some videos, and got another few coming up. A lot of videos on layoffs and some things about men dealing with toxic managers. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing. So I hope you've enjoyed the live stream. I don't see any other comments coming through. So hopefully you've got all your questions answered. I remember seeing there was a poll that I posted. You can see in the chat right now. What do you think is most to blame for the struggle to find jobs in the economy? I see 41% said it's government policies and a bad economy. And the other 41% said corporate hiring bias against men, essentially girl bosses. So the government and the girl bosses, I'll put it in the chat now. Government and girl boss. Government plus girl boss equals men suffering. That's quite funny, isn't it? That is quite funny. Government plus girl boss equals men suffering, right? That's what the poll is basically saying. Like, so 80% of you say these are the two main causes of the struggle for men to find jobs, which I think is kind of valid. And then we've got one last comment before I end the live stream. I've started training towards becoming an electrician. That's great. I covered that on the video. You know, you've got to build multiple skills. If you can become an electrician and learn how to code or do one kind of technical job and one physical job, that's great. You can use your brain. You can have a mental skill and a physical skill, maximize your income and mix and match those throughout the week to make a ton of money. Isambard says, I found the corporate world was too much about nepotism rather than meritocracy. Yeah, that's true. That's a fair point. Lots about social cliques, and these are things that help you navigate if you're in the corporate world and you're trying to survive it. And meritocracy, and I would say it can be difficult also in the trades, because I know people who work in the trades, and sometimes the people who are training you, they might be difficult with you unless you're sucking up to them. So it can be difficult. But in the trades, and also to a certain extent in the corporate world, if you develop certain skills, you can basically be self-employed, and that's what you need to be heading for. And if you watch my channel, you know that's probably the medium to long-term goal for you. Men can adapt to difficult circumstances. Yeah, I think working in smaller size firms is better than those in larger businesses. Yeah, I think a lot of the time that can be the case, but it also depends on how much money you want to make, because sometimes there'll be less money at the smaller firms, even though if you have more freedom and flexibility. So it does depend. Okay, I'm going to end the live stream. Leave a comment below. You can leave it below the live stream too as a normal video comment, and I can respond to them. And I'll see you with a video coming out in about an hour and a half on the channel, and another 9 videos for the next 9 days. And leave comments there and I'll respond to them. Thanks for watching.